welcome to this ET Now special. Joining me today are the veterans and the big wigs at the Confederation for Indian Industry. Less than 24 hours to go for union budget. It's being called now or never. But is it time now to also align your expectations? Joining me to talk about that and a lot more, the big wigs from CII, Vikram Kirloskar, Chandrajit Banerjee, Suman Sinha, as well as Vinayak Chatterjee. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. You're the president of the CII. Let's begin by asking you, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's being said that it has to be 20 on 10. Is it even possible?
No, I don't want to get into... I'm not the teacher and I'm not the grader. But we've certainly had a challenging time over the last... in some industries have done well. I can't say it's across the board, but it's been a challenging time last 12, 18 months. Economic growth has not been as much as was forecast in the last economic survey. This economic survey is a little more subdued, but still positive.
It's lavender, it's not blue.
It's 6.6 to 6.5. That's still a big plus from 5. I think if we get in that direction, it'll be excellent. I hope what he's written is good. But some of the directions he's also talked about, more free markets, getting government out of business. I think he's given things like Assemble in India, open up how to get more of these things in, are positive in nature. What else? What can the finance minister do except spend more? That's now to stimulate demand. I can't think of anything else. And perhaps, as I've heard some people say, we may have to spend our way out of this issue. So that's what I think we'll have to expect.
So, I think everybody, including the chief economic advisor, is, and everyone has a view, right? Breach the fiscal deficit target now or never, give growth a chance. Growth must come at whatever cost. Chandrajit Banerjee, while that may be the case, one still has to look at the quality of the fiscal deficit as well, right? What are your expectations from the union budget? Forget what the chief economic advisor is saying, that that document is also not binding on the government. All of you have been meeting with the finance minister. All of you have also had one meeting with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Realistically, what is possible?
I think if you really look at from what's required in the country at this point in time, obviously growth is the most important. But what the budget really needs to show that it will be able to provide is more jobs. And I think that's if you really look at the headline that needs to come out tomorrow morning, is how are we going to create those jobs that are so much required? And that's going to be the answer to all the issues that we are really talking about, where do we get the capacity coming from, the issue of the demand picking up from. So I think that's going to be very, very critical. And I think, therefore, when you talk about the fiscal and whether we breach the fiscal and how much we breach it by and qualitatively what we do, is it in focus on areas like, say, construction, infrastructure? Construction itself will create jobs, especially in the rural sector too. And that itself will pick up a huge amount of demand that it can. So one would really look at such things coming out in the budget.
It's very easy to say construction, but then who's going to do the construction? The private sector is refusing to invest. The banks are refusing to lend. How is it going to happen?
So it's a chain, actually, if you really need to say why is private sector not willing to go ahead? So there is this huge thing of payments, so to say, that needs to be, it's a given that needs to be done. And I think it's pretty much clear that we need to see that flowing in. And that's given. These things are given, and I'm sure we have talked about all this so much in the last few months. One would really see them happening at this point in time. And so given all of that, and banks, again, that would be if you really look at how you can facilitate the NBFCs, that's a huge thing. And that's, again, one would like to see, one was looking forward to the budget on that. So be it the area of construction, be it the area of the agricultural sector or the rural economy, front-loading, say, of much of the, and also if you really look at the financial sector today, which is really affecting the real sector. I would think that all of it really needs to be seen in the budget, and these are huge expectations, and I'm sure that the budget will throw much light on all this tomorrow.
Suman Sinha, we're also going into union budget with one very scary data point that came out today. You've seen a massive revision of the growth, right? 6.1% from the earlier projection of 6.9%. That may be for a previous financial year, but that just shows you how bad the state of affairs is. While, Chandrabir Banerjee gives reasons for the private sector not picking up, the other big reason is also this issue of trust. And that is existing between the government, not existing between the government and the private sector. A lot of you are scared simply because you don't know kal ED aayega, fir CBI aayega, fir tax department aayega.
No, look, I think that that's an overblown issue. I think that companies that have done things in the past that warrant visits from investigative agencies perhaps will get them. Because I think this government is doing the right thing, which is that they are trying to clean up the system. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's an overdue thing that is very much required. And so, yes, that cleanup is causing some of these things to happen, where certain companies are having to declare bankruptcy, going to NCLT, getting visits from the ED or the other investigative agencies. But I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think companies that have continued to follow the highest aspects of corporate governance and ethical practices, which I think is the vast majority of companies, I think have nothing to fear. So I think that it's not really so much an issue of this causing a deficit of trust and
because the
those
fact
kinds
is
of
that companies have also been able to take advantage of a far lower corporate tax rate cut. And you've still not seen investments pick up. Neither are you hearing any good noise about jobs or salary raises.
But there are a lot of very fundamental reasons for that. I think one of those you touched upon, which is the issue of the fact that the whole financial market is seized up right now. Banks are not lending, NBFCs are cutting exposure. And when that kind of thing happens, so for example, if a bank had lent to me and now they're cutting their exposure to me, I have to find alternative mechanisms where I can offlay my debt. So it's really, causing a lot of stress in the system. And unless this stress is actually dealt with and resolved, and people know that this issue is now behind us, the lending will not really start in the measure that it needs to start to encourage investments to take off.
Yeah.
And so in the budget, therefore, one of the things, if the finance minister can look at doing, is finding a way to address the financial sector, because that is one of the 2 or 3 things that underlies all sectors. And so therefore, if you can improve the financial market or the financial sector, I think that will go a long way towards reviving private investments. The second thing that is very critical, taxes, which of course the government has already reduced quite substantially, but there are still a few things that can be improved. For example, dividend distribution tax or long-term capital gains tax, which are things that are not really collecting that much money for the government, but are causing significant dampened sentiments. So if those things can be removed...
Yeah, we're close to that 40,000 crore rupee collection target for LTCG, DDT. They're saying that maybe it'll be passed on to the receiver.
Hopefully it does. At least companies then don't have to pay that tax. So the point is, those kinds of things will just improve the capital market sentiment. It'll improve corporate sentiment, which again, as we know, sentiment being dampened is one of the other key problems. The third key problem that the government looks like they're certainly going to address is the issue of infrastructure. Because the cost of doing business in India applies to every single business, whether you're a good business, big business, small business, etc. Having high cost of power, poor roads, all of those things, right? So if the government is certainly looking at addressing all of those issues, if it does, through the National Infrastructure Financing Plan and so on, I think that will be a big positive. So if the finance minister can address these 3 or 4 issues in the budget, I think that itself will go a long way towards improving sentiment.
You're all part of that super rich club. Now, none of you have talked about personal income tax because there's no hope on that. I'll come to that in just a bit.
You can ask that question.
You understand.
Last in the line.
You understand infrastructure the best also over here. You've heard all of them talking about it. And it is a real multiplier like real estate. Now, real estate, for some reason, since 2014 is out of favor with this government. They look at real estate very, very negatively. But for infrastructure, give us 2 or 3 big ideas that you think are realistically possible.
Okay, I think the fact that the economic policy has kind of given legitimacy and license to the finance minister from a professional economist to increase the fiscal deficit, by and large would lead to it being used largely for expenditure on the infrastructure sector. From CII, we have recommended that it be slanted a little towards projects in rural India, whether it is water supply, Jal Shakti Ministry has been created, so we are looking for some major outlays there, and rural roads, irrigation. These are all areas where infrastructure can be slightly slanted towards rural projects to put money and jobs in those geographies. The second suggestion we've made is that we have strongly advocated a developmental financial institution for the infrastructure sector without the negative hangover of the IDBI. I don't want to get caught in that. But a new 21st century DFI, which will leverage budgetary funds. Now remember, while there is a sanction for fiscal expansion, there is so much the finance minister can do.
And has to look for new sources of income as well, right?
Therefore, the important thing is not just to use, let us say, in fact, what CII has recommended to the government is that a simple arithmetic, a 0.5% relaxation in the fiscal deficit gives you 1 lakh crore, right? And if you were able to meet your targets of asset monetization, privatization, disinvestment, all those bundle of off-budget resources or non-tax revenues, then you have a corpus of 2 lakh crores extra from both these, relaxation of the fiscal deficit and off-budget sources of or non-tax revenues. Now you can take that 2 lakh crores and you can distribute it amongst 7 infrastructure ministries, or you can take that 2 lakh crores, put it as equity capital in a DFI and leverage it minimum 9 times. Now you could, Japan and China at different stages of their growth have leveraged it 30 times, 40 times. Be cautious and leverage it 9 times, which is standard policy for any NBFC. Then you have 2 plus 18 lakh crores. You've got a 20 lakh crore corpus to actually put around to giving that major sledgehammer impact to the economy to pull it out of this kind of diminishing cycle. So these are 2 strong suggestions that we have given to the government on the infrastructure side, and one is actually looking forward to these announcements tomorrow.
Well, we'll see how many of them make it in Nirmala Sitharaman's budget
May I make
speech.
one more point on infra? For example, if you look at it from, just step back a little, there are basically 3 interventions that any government and finance minister can do in a current situation. There's monetary policy, there's fiscal policy, and there's structural reforms. Monetary policy is out, there's no transmission, and I think that is not in the discussion. And it's not FM's remit either. So she's basically got fiscal, and there is a limit to how much you can do before you invite criticisms of a downgrade or profligacy. So you can do 0.3, 0.4% max. So there are limitations on what you can do there vis-a-vis expectations. So the expectation is structural reforms and a huge degree of emphasis on non-tax revenues. In fact, we have a genuine credibility problem in this country that announcements on disinvestment targets are never met. This year, the target was...
No, they met them in the last 2-3 years.
Well, let me talk of this year.
You're used to them not meeting them, but this year is looking difficult.
This is 18,000 crores out of a 105,000 crore target. But in this year, without the major capital transfers that happened in this fiscal, from the Reserve Bank of India and the dividends, which are not going to happen in 2020-2021. You're not going to have the luxury of relying on RBI capital transfers. You've got certain stresses on tax collection. You have to focus on disinvestment, monetization, privatization.
The government has no business being in business. I believe that is the call that has come from the Prime Minister's office.
You can't just announce a target. You'll actually have to stand hammer and tongs and see that it's happening.
BPCL, let's see what happens with Air India. They're seeming more confident.
Instead of just 2 of them, there need to be 10 companies.
We understand the Niti Aayog is coming out with a list.
You need to do it in companies like ONGC and all. I mean, you need to really move towards that. And both brownfield as well as asset monetization, along with look at government-run companies which are doing well. I think that's where we need to see dilution. That's where the revenues are going to come from, because revenues is a big challenge. And at this point in time, revenues, as you said just a while back, I think the government would also need to look at revenues. And revenues, today you already have a situation where you have lower taxes and therefore you are challenged. But historically, we have seen whenever you have lower taxes, you're actually...
Your compliance goes up, you collect more.
So we'll have to give space to that, number one. Number two, at the same time, you will have to see, look at the rationalization of taxes, and DDT is one of the things that you can do to see And even on the GST front, which is of course not
But
everything
that's
is
not
not a
part
part
of
of
the
the
purview
budget.
of the union
Yeah, not a
budget.
part of the budget, but there is a lot of scope on revenue if you do some
In
rationalization.
fact, I want to bring Vikram Kirloskar in on this. You know, you're also from an industry which started the whole slowdown noise, right? Motown, auto, no jobs, cut in production, you know, unscheduled cuts and all of that. There is now a view that you had started seeing the auto sector pick up. Now again, January apparently has not been that good. You know, similarly, you heard other noises from the government. Airline traffic has picked up. Electricity data is looking up. So it's not as bad as industry cries. But having said that, for your sector, which signifies consumption, it's been bad.
It's been bad. It's been bad for last 18 months. Yeah.
And what do you do? Like, do you just announce that cut in personal income tax? Because people are saving. If they're not buying biscuits, they're certainly not going to buy cars.
You know, they're not going to buy cars. I think in the car industry, there have been some good things structurally in the country. One is the number of metros. 2 cities have gone to, I think, 18 cities. I think certainly
I take
affected.
metros, I take Uber, I take Ola.
You take all that?
Yeah.
Okay. Then the other thing which I feel also, okay, besides the NBFC crisis and not getting enough retail finance, you know, last couple of years, inflation has been at a very, very low point. And if I look at salary increases in Bangalore, where I live, have not been as high now as they used to be. And I think when people buy a big ticket item like a car with the associated EMI and things, it hedges very well with a continuous salary increase, a higher salary increase. Once that starts coming down, you start thinking twice, you know, do I need to do it this year or can I wait another year?
Yeah.
And I think that has been a bigger effect. The know your customer requirements, the KYC requirements for a guy buying a car, what used to, if I went to buy a car, 4 people would try to sell me finance. It doesn't happen anymore. I have to wait 4 to 5 weeks and try with 4 or 5 people to get finance. So there's a change in the whole structure of how
And
things are
scrappage policy, how
going.
crucial is that going to be?
I think scrappage policy is very crucial, not only for the industry.
The
I think it's more
sustainability.
important for the environment.
Yeah.
I think I think we should look at it more from the environmental viewpoint rather than from the industry viewpoint.
In fact, he's wearing a badge dedicated right now to sustainability. And Chandra Banerjee, if I could come to you with that, you know, since we're talking about sustainability, you've had someone like Larry Fink of BlackRock say that that is what is going to decide. Actually, Suman should also come in on this, on portfolio allocation and the way the finance world works. Is this also going to be a miss if Nirmala Sitharaman doesn't look at climate, doesn't look at environment? Yes, we need to look at our finances and jobs, but hey, we have a right to breathe clean air too, right?
Absolutely, and I think, I mean, that's a given, and I think that there's no way that one can negotiate on that. And I think we would have to focus on sustainability. We'll have to look at the entire spectrum of sustainability as we look at the budget, and it must incentivize. Incentivize, and that's one of the critical outcomes of the budget that is expected. And secondly, I think the government overall goals, if you see over the last few years, have been pretty much consistent. If one looks at the entire area of climate, the entire area of the sustainable developmental goals that the government, and we are pretty much aligned with it, and I think it should just take that forward.
Correct. So let's see if that actually happens, because, you know, for the youth, and we keep talking about our demographic dividend.
When we talk on sustainability, since you pointed out this badge, sustainability depends a lot on a behavior change, individual behavior change.